Hey everybody, welcome to this behind the scenes interview with I said Rebecca, Elizabeth Corbett. So glad you could be here. We're going to talk about nature-based intensives, equine therapy, and just your transition into offering intensives. Because I know so many folks want to know what that experience is like. And it's different for everybody, but it'll be fun to hear your experience.
Yeah, thank
So,
you. I'm
yeah.
excited to be here.
Woo-woo. Tell the folks here, I know about you and your awesomeness, but tell folks a little bit about your practice, where you are, and your intensives.
Yeah. So I'm Elizabeth Corbett. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and relocated here about 5 years ago from Atlanta. Wanted to get closer to nature and wanted to do more equine-based work. So I actually moved to Asheville because this is where I had done all of my trainings for equine therapy over the years. And the place that I did the trainings, they're a trauma healing farm. They're not a typical kind of horse boarding farm. It is all therapeutic work for the horses and for the humans. So it's a beautiful facility. So I've been here for about 5 years. I offer experiential therapy. So I do EMDR, I do nature-based intensives, and also used to do weekly nature-based therapy. And I also do equine-assisted psychotherapy and equine assisted learning. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. Things are crazy in our world right now. I am grateful to be here. I'm grateful to have shelter and power, and actually really grateful to just have an hour to just have a little bit of a reprieve from what's going on here. The community spirit is amazing, and vicarious trauma is for sure real. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, it's even more meaningful, and I know this will, be shared as a recording, and people may catch it at various times. But if you're not aware, Hurricane Helene has impacted the especially Asheville area and Western North Carolina. So thank you so much for being here in
Yeah.
the midst of it all. We're
Yeah.
also going to be sharing links if you want to contribute to the recovery efforts in Western North Carolina. Those links will be posted with this recording as well because it's going to be um, a long recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
It's been amazing to see so many therapist groups coming together and volunteering to serve pro bono
Yeah.
uh, for the folks who've been impacted. So,
Yeah, it's an amazing community here. Just like our intensives community, which is, more global, but in Asheville, there really is not a scarcity mindset. It's
mhm.
definitely an abundant mindset, and everyone is just stepping in and trusting that things are going to work out and just really offering support when they can. And I mean, it's nothing you would ever wish, but it's been also a beautiful thing to witness and be a part of. It's been powerful how people have come together. So yeah, but thank you for mentioning it, Stephanie. It's intense here.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think I mentioned this in the group, but my mom lives outside of Asheville, and
Mhm.
sh unfortunately she lost her home and
Yeah.
vehicles, and so it's a lot. It's a lot for
Yeah.
it's all to
Woo.
handle. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
We gotta. I know. We gotta.
Take it off.
Well, it is intense. And there may be opportunities for intensives
Mhm.
as time goes on.
Yeah.
So tell us, I want to get the whole backstory of how you came to where you are, but give us a snapshot right now at this point in time. What do the intensives that you're offering look like in
Mhm.
terms of, how long they are, what you're doing, and who you're serving?
Okay. Um, as you probably experienced, I've done a few different things, right, to kind of find what settles best with me and with what I want to do as far as my work, and also what seems to be the needs in my community. So I started out offering intensives. I took your course in January of this year, and I just put it out there that I'm going to do 3 intensives this year. and I'm just going to see. And so I hadn't even advertised, right? I had just put that intention out there. And within the first month, I had 3 people reach out wanting to do an intensive. So I met my goal for the year and I was hooked. So right now I'm offering 2 different kinds of intensives. The primary one that I'm offering is a 12 to 15 hour intensive that occurs over a month. It's equine therapy, and it also has a lot of nature-based practices to help with resourcing and things like that. I also do 1, 2, and 3 day EMDR intensives on the farm. It's a 110-acre beautiful farm in Marshall, so it's just a beautiful restorative place to be. And so when I work with individuals for EMDR, we are in a beautiful private meadow that has a covered pavilion. It has a labyrinth. It has a great open view. And then it also has some forest, and that's the trees are what we use for our eye movements rather than doing
Wow.
this or a light bar. People are actually finding 2 focal points in their view and
Mhm.
using that. And those, like I said, tend to be 1 to 3 days, depending on what the person wants to work on. I work with a lot of people who have experienced equine related incidents that have been difficult for them. So that might be they've taken a fall, or they had a rough trailering experience, or their horse got really ill or even died. So trauma related to the equine world.
Mhm.
And I also work with people, a lot of veterans, a lot of parents who are trying to do things differently than the way they were raised and have complex children for a lot of them. And then I also work a lot with first responders. That's because my background is critical care nursing, working with preemies and then going out into the community and supporting them. That's why I went back to grad school, was there was such a gap in mental mental health support for those families that were really going through it.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. And I could see how going from a very stressful, chaotic environment into nature, just
Hmm.
that itself could be so
Yeah.
like grounding and soothing. You
Yeah.
said 12 to 15 hours. How
Hmm.
long are the sessions or how many days does that involve?
Yeah, I love it. So what I have found tends to be the sweet spot is we'll do a 60 or 90-minute intake, and that's via Zoom. And then we will do three-hour intensive sessions, 1 a week. And then we do a debrief 2 to 4 weeks afterwards. And the additional hours in there are for case consultation, because with equine therapy, you have a treatment team, you have your equine partner, you have a equine specialist, and you also have the therapist. So the additional hours are set aside for coming up with a treatment plan based on what the clients want to work on, and meeting every week just to talk about where we're at, what we want to bring in for that session, how the horses are doing, right? What challenges came up, and just kind of having that real flexibility of touching base to keep the process fluid, but also following our clear treatment goals.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah. So 12 to 15 hours. And then sometimes we will offer aftercare if the person, when we check in for the debrief, if they're feeling like there's still a little of work they might want to do, then we can work with them on that. The
Hmm.
cool thing, and I'll just go ahead and interject this because people say, well, how do you pay for that? Like, how do
Hmm.
people pay for 15 hours of equine assisted therapy? Because it's usually, it runs 250 an hour by the time you pay the farm, the horses, and the humans.
Sure.
Um, and so the farm I'm at, they have federal grants to support veterans and people who have been victims of crime. And
Wow.
so this work we're doing allows them to access and utilize their grant funds, which they have to use them or lose them.
Yeah.
And it allows them to support the populations that they created this healing farm for. And
Wow.
it also allows people who wouldn't have access because of financial barriers to really have this transformative experience.
Wow.
So
That's
that was a lot, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
yeah, yeah. And I'm sure, if there's anybody on the call who like does equine therapy or has questions specific to that, I'm sure like please feel free to put it in the chat, any questions. Um, but it didn't even like since that's outside my scope, I wasn't even thinking about the additional people and the additional costs. And so
Yeah.
that's just really, really wonderful that those grants are available.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing I would add to that, um, and it kind of goes along with the pacing and the timing of how do you kind of create a program that is meaningful, for the therapist and also for the community. I have worked at this farm ever since moving to Asheville and had my horse there. So strong relationship. And I reached out last November or so to the organization and said, hey, I'm going to move into doing this kind of work. I'm already bringing people to the farm to have extended sessions. Are you interested in talking about equine therapy intensives? And didn't hear back. Months went by. I'm like, that's cool. I just wanted to put it out there. And then I circled back around in January and said, I'm just circling back around, just want to touch base. Totally fine if it doesn't feel like a fit, but if it is, let's talk. And like a month later, the executive director of the nonprofit affiliated with the farm reached out and said, oh my gosh, yes. And so we have partnered since
Mhm.
then. And so I say that just to say there's been a trajectory of me realizing in the fall, this is what I want to do. And I just want to see who's out there that might be interested. And it was, 6 months later that the person circled back around and said, yeah, I'm interested. And we are
Mhm.
actually,
Mhm.
she's the executive director, but she's also an equine specialist. So she and I are building this program together.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so that was just encouraging to me, right? I didn't get discouraged when I didn't hear back. I was like, it is what it is. But then
Mhm.
when I heard
Mhm.
back, we really started to create something really vibrant. It's been a very cool process.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
appreciate that so much because I think, you know, in the intensive community, we like to celebrate successes a lot, but I think it moves at different paces for different people. And we are sometimes thinking, like, oh man, that's happening for them or for them. Why isn't it happening for me? And it's
Yeah.
like, no, everything comes, there can be a period of wait where it feels ambiguous. And then
Hmm.
there can be the moments, of synchronicity where you find someone and the visions align and it starts to take off. So that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh.
I'm trying to glance at the chats too. Victoria, yes, I'm with Horse Sense of the Carolinas in Marshall. That was one of the questions.
Oh, great. It also looks like this is great. So questions related to when you're working in nature or you're working with horses, do you have the same consent or do you have something additional in your intake
Mhm.
forms and consents?
Yeah, such a good question. I have my usual consent, right, about treatment, and I send out an intake form where I get a little bit of history, but then I have a separate document that is about being out in nature, being in a space that does not have a door, right? So even though privacy is mostly insured, it's not guaranteed. And also the risks and liability of being out where you're working with 1,000-pound animals and walking on uneven
Mm-hmm.
ground. So when people come to the farm, I use the farm's consent form, which covers all of that. And when I was in Atlanta doing nature-based work, I did a lot of additional education about how to do it safely and ethically. And through
Mm-hmm.
that certification process, I also created my own consent form. So if I'm not at the farm, I use that one, which
Mm-hmm.
is about being outdoors where things are more unpredictable. And when I'm at the farm, I use the farm's consent just because it's very well done and it's been vetted by a North Carolina lawyer, so it feels like a solid document.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense that if you're at a property that has their own consent and liability insurance, you would fall under that. But if you're, doing it more independently, you'd have your own.
Yeah, yeah. And ROIs also come up sometimes.
Yeah.
And the way I work with that at the farm, because I do have an equine specialist who's part of the treatment team, I get an ROI signed with the nonprofit because they manage the funding, so it's specific to the funding piece.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
also have an ROI between the equine specialist and my client and myself, just to kind of cover all the bases about confidentiality and also to set up the framework that we will all work together. So that's been pretty important too, and a client feeling like they know what's going on when they step onto the property, doing that work on the back, on the front end, so that when
Hmm.
they show up, they're not feeling as much worry or anxiety about what am I going to do here? What's going to look like?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that initial contact, and do you
Mhm.
do any specific screenings, or do you have any criteria in terms of what would maybe make someone not be an ideal fit for your intensives?
Yeah, yeah. If someone is in crisis, then generally I tell them that this is probably not the best time to do this kind of work.
Hmm.
And so I don't say it's not an option. I just offer them resources to help them kind of get settled and stabilized, and then encourage them to reach back out, 3 to 6 months, depending on what they're facing. So if someone is in immediate crisis where their basic needs are not being met, or they feel unsafe, or they're just completely dysregulated, then we work on kind of getting them settled just in their body and in their environment before
Sure.
we talk about doing an intensive. Um, when I do the screening, so I have a list of people who are interested in doing them, and I'll reach out and just make phone contact first and just find out a little bit more about their history with therapy, what experiences they'd like to work on. Do they have a specific target or a specific goal? Um, and if that all seems like it's a potential good fit, then I send them a little bit of a longer document, just getting a little bit more of a history. And at that point, I have a pretty good sense. And I'm also really open about this is this is what an intensive is intended. It's very focused. It can be quite structured. We have a clear target. So we're not going to do a lot of meandering. We'll see where things go, but I'm also going to be pulling you back a lot. Um, so that they have a sense of how it might be different than a more typical weekly
Hmm.
therapy session that you might see a clinician for 6 months or a year. Yeah, so I do screen suicidality, if there have been recent attempts or even, ideation that's pretty significant. Then
Hmm.
again, I encourage them to get a little weekly support to feel a little bit more stabilized and then to circle back. And substance use, if someone is actively using substances, then I request that they work on that piece of it first, just
Hmm.
because it's hard to do this deep work safely if and effectively, right? They're not going to have the
Hmm.
experience they want if they're using substances in a way that is not working for them.
Sure, sure. I could understand that even, when you have large animals involved, or
Hmm.
you're out in nature, you don't have like the same containment you would have like in an office,
Right.
that some of those factors could be more important.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You're out of your comfort zone automatically.
Right,
Yeah.
right. How are people finding you?
Good question.
I know.
I mean, I tell people what I'm doing a lot. I have a strong community in Atlanta, where I did my internship and worked as a contractor for years with a holistic private practice there that works with families of children with complex needs. So I get a lot of referrals for them. Most people come up from out of town to do my EMDR or my non-equine intensives. And then as far as the equine intensives, there's a pretty vibrant community here in Horse Sense of the Carolinas. They're known internationally. And so
Mhm.
people reach out to them and then they reach out to me if they feel like it might be a good intensives fit versus a weekly therapy. So I think word of mouth, I have information on my website. I hope that people are seeing that information. I stink at SEO, so I'm going to start getting some support to track that. But not right now, maybe in a few months. So
Yeah,
I would say word of mouth and just my relationships with other therapists to have clients that they feel like might be served well now or in the future by doing an intensive.
yeah. I mean
Yeah.
that makes so much sense when it's a really specialized and
Mhm.
premium service that people are going to hear, or they're more likely to follow through when they hear from someone they already know
Yeah.
and trust who's sending them your way.
Yeah, and I love working adjunctively. So, like, that's my preferred way to work is to collaborate. And so, I really appreciate the referrals and really appreciate having that connection with the therapist that's working with the client ongoing
Mhm.
um, to make the experience, the intensive experience, as useful and as aligned with the work they're already doing. So that collaboration piece is meaningful to me, and
Mhm. Mhm.
um, I value it really much. I think it brings a lot to the experience when I can be connected that way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I have more questions, but people who are here live, tell us
Okay.
questions in the chat. Um, ooh, let's see. One just like popped in, so you were ready to go. How many of your work hours are intensives versus weekly hour sessions in a month
Yeah.
for emotional balance? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's so important. And I don't know that I would have thought about that if I hadn't gone through your course, Stephanie, because psychologically it was hard for me to carve out days for intensives, meaning the commitment I made to myself in January was I'm going to block out 2 days a week and I'm not going to see weekly clients. I'm only going to do extended sessions. So that was a leap of faith. And also I was really ready to start working with this model. So I do one 12 to 15 hour intensive client a month. And that works out to be about 3 to 5 hours a week. Um, Emotionally, that feels like a really good balance. I feel like I'm not rushed in doing the treatment planning and the collaboration with the treatment team. And it still feels like we get really good traction meeting every week. I also do, trying to think, I run some groups. So I probably do about 8 hours a week of groups,
Hmm.
which tend to be lighter. They're equine therapy, but it's not psychotherapy as much as it's equine assisted learning. So those are, social skills or relational skills, things like that. So that all happens outdoors, which really helps me with my emotional um, bandwidth. If I can do work
Sure.
outdoors, it really helps me. And then as far as my weekly clients, I see 10 to 15. I'm trying to not have any weekly clients starting next year. We'll see how it goes. Some of these relationships are long term and people
Yeah.
doing really good work, but my preference would be keeping it around 10 and then slowly through attrition kind of easing out of that. But right now, um, it's about 6, 7 hours of equine stuff or being at the farm, and then about 10 hours, 10 to 15 of hourly weekly clients in
Hmm.
the office.
Hmm. That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. That feels very similar to my experience. I felt like when I was doing one 3-day intensive per month, that
Hmm.
felt like a very good flow.
Yeah.
Um, when I put it up a little bit more, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
That's can you can have to find balance in new ways, right? When you make changes to your practice. So
Yeah.
very exciting. Let me see. I think there's a few others in the chat. Can you discuss about your payment method?
Hmm.
This is a good question. Do people pay in full up front, or what's the payment schedule like?
Yeah. Good questions. Finances are always a big piece of this equation. So, horse sense, and it's pretty much a going rate, is about $250 for a 50-minute session. That covers the farm cost, the care of the animals, and the equine specialist and the mental health clinician. So it covers a lot for that amount,
Yeah.
but it's a lot of money. And if we're talking 12 to 15 hours, that's a whole lot of money. So again, I'm partnering with HorseSense, and they are utilizing their grants for the intensive clients that I'm working with doing equine assisted therapy. So clients do not have to pay anything if they're not able. And if they do want to contribute, then they can contribute whatever amount feels right for them. So that's a beautiful model. Um, and again, it's just so powerful, especially working with veterans and first responders who often being a former first responder and critical care nurse, often we don't have a lot of disposable income for self-care, and we need it in so many ways. So that's how the horse sense piece is managed when I'm doing an equine assisted intensive there. They pay what they can, and the nonprofit through grants pays the rest. When I'm doing sessions at the farm that are nature-based or that might have 1 or 2 hours of equine therapy, but it's primarily a nature-based intensive,
Mm-hmm.
then clients pay 50% of the cost of the intensive at the time of booking, and then they pay 50% the final payment the first day of the intensive.
Mm-hmm.
So a little
Mm-hmm.
bit different, and they pay through credit card generally to my private practice.
Yeah, yeah, great.
Hmm.
That's so incredible. I mean, partnerships is just accessible to the people who need it most.
Yeah,
Love
yeah.
that. One question is, do you have to own horses to be able to offer this, or can you collaborate with a farm?
Yeah, you can totally collaborate with a farm. It is really hard to run your own farm with horses and also do this kind of work. I mean, they're really like two full-time plus jobs on steroids. So, um, partnering with a farm is definitely doable. And farms who want to do this work are always looking for licensed clinicians who are interested in doing the work because it does require a lot of additional training to do it ethically and well and therapeutically. So you absolutely don't have to own your own horses. There are farms that are always advertising for clinicians interested in doing it. And I'll go ahead, if it would be helpful, I'll tell my training.
Yeah.
Because as an equine therapist, there are a lot of different trainings out there. So I primarily have focused on Natural Lifemanship is the name of the organization. They're an attachment-based, trauma-informed organization that is all about relationship. So I'm trained through level 2 with them, and in January I'm doing an additional training that is incorporating EMDR into equine work. So that's really the organization that speaks to my heart about the work that resonates with me. I'm also certified through EGALA, which is an international organization, and they have a lot of funding for veterans and first responders. So they're a great organization to be connected with. Their model's a little different in that it's much more about metaphor. So the horse is not always the horse. Sometimes the horse is my dad, or sometimes the horse is my kid brother. And that doesn't work as well with me. So it's useful, but I really lean into my natural lifemanship certification and training more than anything. So there are a lot of trainings out there. Those are the two I've worked with. That's not to say the other ones aren't great. They're just what has resonated with me.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the other question was, can you tell us a little bit about what happens in the intensive? And
Yes.
I'll add on to that, kind of like the results that you've seen or how it's like impacted your clients.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I can totally geek out on this and I won't.
How about
Uh,
just give us a little bit?
so equine therapy, we know works really well with people who've experienced trauma. And it works really well for a lot of reasons. One is that horses give you immediate feedback on how you're showing up. And it's really non-judgmental feedback, right? And so they are so great at teaching people to learn what cues they're giving off, what's going on with them. It's a great way to build somatic awareness and how your emotions kind of settle into your body, because horses are prey animals, right? And we're apex predators. And so seeing our impact on them when we're in their space can be so powerful. And they're also great at co-regulating, right? So if I'm working with someone who's quite dysregulated and really wants to work on strengthening those skills, when I bring in our herd of wise ones who are just like smarter than I'll ever be,
Oh,
they they really kind of form a shield for that person to help them get regulated and to experience what that's like in their body, right? To have that experiential event where it's like, okay, this is how I felt outside before I walked in, and this is how I'm feeling 30 minutes later. And what a difference, and I can name it. Um, so what does it look like? It always looks the same the first day, which is we might go over some additional intake questions if we have any anything we're curious about or want to flesh out a little bit more. And then we tour the farm. Again, that's really important just so people can get oriented, right? So they can know where they're at. Um, and it's also fun because we have many horses and many donkeys, and we have multiple herds, and sometimes we'll have deer and turkeys and chickens roaming around. So it's fun. There's a little bit of playfulness and just being on a farm, and it also helps them kind of settle into the space. And then the next thing that we always do is we introduce them to the herd that we're going to be working with. We have multiple herds, and depending on the goals, that's how the equine specialist, I defer to the equine specialist always. That's how they select what herd would be most useful based on the
Oh,
goal. So we have the
yeah.
wise ones. We have what we call our Mensa herd. We also call them the turd herd
Huh.
because they are also very brilliant, but they're still learning how to, engage socially appropriately. We have two feral horses that for 20 years had never been touched by a human. So they're really powerful to work with if you are trying to figure out how to enter into a relationship gently and with consent, um,
Hmm.
how to
Hmm.
be engaged in a consensual way within a relationship. And then we have our working herd, which we use primarily. And we have our little horses, our mini horses and donkeys too. So when we meet the herd, that's a really powerful clinical piece because it allows us to assess how the client is that day through them um, being on this side in Humanville. That's what we call it. We're in Humanville. They're in Horseville. There's a line separating us. Seeing the observations that they speak of as they're watching the herd interact, how they connect with the herd, what they notice about each horse. It really is such a rich time to get a sense of core beliefs, things that are soothing to them, things that make them feel anxious or scared or agitated. And it's also a time for them to see what it's like to be around that many horses in a space. And then we also go in and meet them. So we have observation meet and greet is what Horse Sense has coined it, and it's a classic Horse Sense way to assess your clients and to let them safely meet the herd. So that's the first part. And then the person picks usually 2 to 3 to 4 horses that they want to work with for the rest of the intensive. And
Wow.
again, really rich material as far as why they picked this horse, why they didn't pick that horse, why they picked these two together, why they don't want that horse anywhere within sight. And so after they've picked their horse, we usually take a break. We try to take a break every hour. It's more like every hour 15, every hour and a half, because time goes by like that. Um, and then we have them come in and spend some one-on-one time in the space with horses in which they're just introducing themselves, is what we say. Um, there in whatever way feels safe to them. We don't give them a lot of rules. We ask them, what can you do to keep yourself safe? So we let them come up with their own strategies for staying safe. And we're, of course, there. We're not going to let anything crazy happen. But it's about them feeling like they have agency. They don't need us to keep them safe in there. They can figure out what they need to stay safe, and we can support that.
Yeah.
Uh, so again, it's an opportunity for them to meet their horses and to really connect on a not to be woo-woo, but like a vibrational level with these
Yeah.
horses and to really incorporate that they're also part of their treatment team. So
Mhm.
at the end of the first day, our 3 hours, they've created their herd, they've created their treatment team, we've crystallized their goals, and we have helped them get oriented to the farm.
Wow.
Um, so that, again, that was a lot, and I could talk about it forever because it's incredibly powerful when you see it unfolding. But that's it basically. We end up with our treatment team and we all are really building rapport and trust and safety for all of us.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then the second and third day, which they're each 3 hours, we really offer activities that are going to support their clinical goals. So if it's relationship building, then we might have 2 horses in there, or maybe even 3, and we might talk about what's it like to be the odd man out, right? How does it feel when you try to insert yourself into a herd that's already established? How can you invite this horse to come hang out with you? What do you have to offer if you can't bribe them or give them treats or touch them?
Hmm.
How can
Hmm.
you show up in relationship in a way that draws the people or the creatures to you that you want to draw. Um, if they want to work on conflict resolution in a healthy way, then we might bring in some of the fierier horses, right?
Mhm.
Where you have to
Mhm.
really be aware of your space and how you're showing up and how you keep yourself safe. So I could go on forever, but it's the second and third day of the intensives when we're doing equine assisted therapy is really creating opportunities for people to explore what their core beliefs are and how they can challenge them and what it to experience what it's like when you challenge a belief and you realize, maybe it could be something else. Maybe this isn't 100% true all the time. So
Wow.
a lot of repair and healing just in that alone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And what do you hear from clients after they've had that experience? What do they share with you?
Yeah, I mean, so much overall. I mean, it's hands down been some of the most rewarding work I've done because of how it impacts clients. And we talk about this a lot when we're doing intensives. When you've got 50 minutes, you have to have an agenda, right? You have to have okay, we're starting, we're checking in, we're going to dive deep, but we've got to come up, we've got to close out, we've got to get everything kind of put back together. Um, and with intensives in general, and with equine assisted therapy specifically, the fact that we can slow it down, and if a moment is happening, that we can stay with it,
Hmm.
that's when the magic happens. And that's the feedback we get from clients, that if you just are on the other side of the fence looking, it looks like they're brushing a horse. No one else is around them. When they give us feedback, and when we're noticing, we're picking up on what's happening too, of course, because we're in the arena. But when they give us feedback, it's like they go through almost the EMDR experience where you're really cresting these waves and you're coming to a rough spot and you're staying with it and you're feeling held and supported and you can see the end of the tunnel, right? If you keep going. And they talk about getting there and then feeling like, okay, I'm supported. I can keep going with what this is bringing up. And then
Uh-huh.
they kind of get over the hump and they get back to a place of feeling settled and empowered. So empowerment is a big theme that comes up. Learning that emotions live in our bodies and that we can learn to recognize them and name them has been a big part of that empowerment and having a sense of agency and actively practicing relational skills with a nonverbal creature so that we really learn all the information we give and receive that's not about words, right? It's about intention and energy and everything we do to communicate who we are that doesn't involve words.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it.
Again, I'm trying not to geek out, but man, I could talk. Well, I am writing a book. I'm writing a book because this work speaks to me so much. And yeah, I would love to write a manual of sorts to really map out exactly what it looks like and break it down step by step because it is beautiful, powerful work that almost everyone resonates with. If they're interested in the concept, then
Mhm.
it's almost always a good fit to do an intensive.
That's beautiful. And just the different way of getting information as opposed to like the traditional way we think, oh, well, you need to go and sit on a couch and
Yeah.
talk about your feelings, but
Mhm.
there's other avenues that
Yeah.
maybe work even better.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I would say that's a commonality in the clients I work with, whether it's veterans or first responders or parents who are really trying to parent differently and they have kids that they have to advocate for on a daily basis, right? You can't,
mhm,
and those folks can't just get to that softer, gentler side and stay there. Their their livelihood, their work, their safety, and as a parent, you know, them showing up for their kids, like it's vital that they can be fierce and they can be warriors
mhm.
and it's vital to learn how to turn it off or step away from it if we're going to have the full human experience. And I certainly experienced that when I worked in a NICU, right? Every shift, something was going to happen, but I was raising three kids myself, and I had to figure out how to leave it at work, but not shut down, right? I had to figure out how to leave it at work and come home and still be able to be online with my family. Um,
Right.
yeah, so it not being us sitting on a sofa talking, it's a really powerful way for people who are doing that, because it really is, we develop wisdom about our bodies and what we can learn and how we can ground ourselves that don't involve talking. Um,
Right. So experiential.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that. I love that. Comments in the chat, just gratitude about, that there can be partnerships, we can connect with organizations, grant funding. Um, just lots of love for this.
yeah.
Can you tell us about the EMDR based EMDR in nature as well? What that looks
Yes,
like?
absolutely. It's one of my most favorite ways to do EMDR. My office, I have a beautiful office, and it has a park across the street. And so often uh, I'll even go out there with clients, and we'll find a little nook just to do some grounding, just because being outdoors just helps so much with that somatic piece. So nature-based EMDR intensives are so cool. Where I do them, again, is primarily at the farm because it's a private 110-acre space. I've done them in other places, but I love that because privacy is almost guaranteed, other than farm people driving by far away. Um, and so I always have a couple of chairs set up, or I invite the person to bring a chair if they want. I have a client care kit that I bring to every intensive that is an essential oil that I've asked them about that they might find soothing or energizing, whatever they think would be supportive. So I make them an essential oil rollerball. I bring them a cool metal fidget. You turned me on to that, Stephanie. Like, it's so great. My clients are like, I want 10 of these. I bring them snacks. I bring them a t-shirt just because I have t-shirts for my practice that are fun,
Sure.
and it's just a cozy t-shirt, and I also have snacks and water. So all the things we might need, and I encourage them to bring their things too. Often it'll be like a big stuffed animal, that's like the size of a pillow. Um, or someone who is a knitter. I've had them bring their needles before. They're not knitting, but there's something about having the needles in their hand that is soothing and kind of helps them get grounded. So we settle into our space outdoors, and if you can imagine, we're sitting with our back is to the pavilion, which has a couple of picnic tables, and then ahead of us is a ring of trees, and then we have this huge open meadow that you can just see for a really long distance. So it's very open, but also very enclosed feeling. Um,
Um,
and there's a labyrinth there. And so for my EMDR intensives, we work first on grounding that first day, if it's more than a 1 day. If it's a 1 day, we do a lot of the grounding in our intake just to be sure they've got some skills that we can access that first day when we meet. But we'll do a lot of grounding, and I always start off by walking in the labyrinth. I have them set an intention for the day. I ask them to think about what they might need, and then I just invite them to travel. And we talk about how labyrinth is not a maze, right? You're going to get to the center. You don't have to figure out, am I going the right way? You just have to notice your walk, notice your journey. And so when we meet in the center, where we also have some benches, they're just like, they're just settled almost always, and in
mhm.
a really positive place to start talking about their targets and to begin to dive into that deeper work. When we do start working with the reprocessing, like I said, I encourage using things in nature, two trees, a fence post, even in the labyrinth, the two sides of the log benches that are there.
Yeah.
And people really resonate with that. I've got all my other stuff too. I've got my little wand, I've got my hand, I've got a metronome. So if they like the audio,
Sure.
So I've got all of that, but generally people want to do the eye movements once they find two trees, and they might incorporate some tapping as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then as far as helping them come back up at the end, we will do some walking,
Mhm.
mindfulness through movement, which that bilateral stimulation is going to help them get re-regulated, kind of get reoriented, come back to the space they're in, get settled, have a snack before they get in their car
Mhm.
and drive, especially if they're driving a long way. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to be more specific, but that's it in a nutshell.
Oh my gosh. I love it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, someone says, what's the metal fidget item?
I wish I had one right here. I got it on Amazon. It's like a metal cube, almost like a Rubik's cube, except there's only a few ways you can fidget with it. And it's this really cool oxidized color. So they might have like pink that kind of blends into this electric blue, or a gray steel. It's really smooth. It's got squared edges, but they're softened, and you can just kind of fidget it into a few different pieces. I bet if you look on Amazon, you can see it.
That's awesome. I know, I'm like all about the fidgets. I
Absolutely.
must.
Yeah.
Love it. Um, I'm guessing this question was, do you get info in your consent or in your intake about the oil, the shirt size, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I usually do it in the intake. So I just will find out what their shirt size is and just say, I usually include a shirt, just as a memento for you of doing this hard work.
Oh.
Um, so, you know, it most of them don't even have my practice name. They're just fun little therapy phrase shirts that are really high quality and cozy to wear. And I tell them, I bring a care package for you on the first day. If they're out of town, I'll mail it so they have it. And then if they're going to do the client workbook, then I'll also bring a copy of the workbook, and I'll just kind of let them know what I'm going to have on hand for them the day they arrive, again, to
Mhm.
help them feel a little bit more settled. And I do always check about oils because some people are sensitive, and
Mhm.
I always want to be cautious about any allergies or sensitivities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I love it. Victoria says, do you use the workbook? Oh, the my workbook, the intensive design lab one, or do you have another, or have you modified your own?
Yeah, I have yours, Stephanie, and I also just bought Cambria's, which you shared with me. You're an alumni of
Yeah, yeah.
her group, so I haven't even looked at it yet. But I was just looking for some additional resources that I could pull together, one that's a little bit more compact, because I found my clients,
Hmm.
they have a hard time getting through it. And there's so much rich information. So what I have done is I'll take a lot of the info from the workbook, and I'll just utilize that in the intake, and I'll
Hmm.
just capture the responses. And then what I send to them is some assessments, some basic history, help them get real clear on what their goals are and what would be different if they were able to have a successful experience, right? If they were able to meet their goal or move closer to it, what would that look like? So those are the main parts of the workbooks that I use. And I use the one that they can fill out electronically, just because it's more of a real time document. And then I print it and bring it to them. I also always get consent for that. Some
Hmm.
people some people don't want to have a document like that, a physical copy.
Sure.
Not safe for them. So that's another piece that I always discuss in the intake. I usually print this out with your answers so you can continue to work on it after the intensive and track your progress. Would you like that, or would you prefer to just have the online version?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
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 Awesome. Um, Let me look. One more question. Do you use the workbook with equine clients, or how is it modified?
Yeah. I don't use the workbook with equine clients. The organization that I'm with, Horse Sense of the Carolinas, they do a lot of retreats. And so I've been so lucky in that I have gotten to do dozens of retreats over the years, multi-day retreats. And so I have my own framework, and Horse Sense has their own framework, and we just really partner well together. So that's another reason that I want to write this book is that we're collaborating and kind of like
Yeah.
putting down all the things that we do, sharing Shannon Knapp's intellectual property. She's the executive director of Horse Sense, and me bringing my piece. So we're really mapping out what an equine assisted psychotherapy intensive looks like. Because I don't think that that's out there yet. So I'm going to write that book. I don't know what will happen, but it's just writing itself actually, and it's really fun. And it's because I don't think that that resource is there right now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
So
love that. It's unfolding in life out of you and
yeah,
you're documenting it to share with
yeah,
others.
yeah. It's energizing and it's a great learning tool for me also, I'm realizing.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is incredible. Oh my goodness. Well, is there anything else that we haven't covered yet that you want to share with folks?
Mhm.
Um, and I'll also say if people want to connect with you,
Mhm.
um, for consultation or for, any other type of connection, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So the other thing I want to share, and this is really just because, again, I'm so passionate about this work, specifically the equine assisted therapy and the nature-based therapy. All of my education post-grad school has been around that. So I would love to share that information with other folks who are interested. So I want to offer three free consultations, three free 50-minute consultations to the first three people who email me. So my email address is Elizabeth, Elizabeth, at Weller Counseling, Weller counseling.net, not
It
.com.
in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, so just reach out to me via email and it'll be first come, first serve. And then I also offer consultations in general for this type of learning. So if you're interested and you don't get in the first three, but you'd still like to meet, my fee is 165. I try to keep it, relatively affordable for the consultation. And we can discuss whatever you're interested, from getting started to doing the deep work to figuring out how to keep it sustainable and meaningful and doable, given that we're
Hmm.
working with nature and elements, and Mother Nature's a little pissed off lately. So,
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
yeah. I just want to share that I have a website, Weller Counseling. The name is from a kid client I worked with when I first started uh, working with kids as a intern. And he was like trying to tell me why he was having a hard time and he was really struggling. He was like a 12-year-old pre-adolescent. And he finally just like said, I just want to feel weller. And it's
Aww.
stuck, right? Like, yes, we all just want to feel weller. So that's the story
Yes.
of the name. It just stuck with me. And so when I opened my own private practice, that's what it was. So hopefully that'll help people remember it a little bit because it's a weird name.
That's amazing. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah, thank
Awesome.
you for this hour. It was really delightful for me to be able to talk about this work and to see all the people that are interested and doing this work alongside the community is powerful. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, thank you. It was beautiful. Yeah, you have lots of thanks in the chat. And this will be reposted in the Facebook group and on the YouTube channel, along with the links to donate your support to Elizabeth's community in Asheville that is recovering from the hurricane.
Yeah,
So,
thank you for posting those. Those are organizations that I see doing really, really good work. And I reached out to my community to get feedback, and they consistently came back with the ones that I shared with you, Stephanie. So they're legit and doing really on the ground work right now as we speak.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
All right, everybody. Take good care, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Thank you.